Now, the American Supreme Court has ruled against the American President Donald Trump's global tariffs, marking a major setback for executive power in trade policy. The top court has said that the tariffs were enacted under a federal law that was meant for national emergencies. The White House has offered no immediate response to the Supreme Court ruling. Donald Trump has labeled it a complete disgrace just moments after learning of the decision during a meeting that he was having with the governors. Now, more than $175 billion in terms of U.S. tariff collections are now at risk of having to be refunded. Importers are expected to scramble for refunds from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency on import duties paid over the past year. And these tariffs, which are enacted under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, have prompted some extensive litigation and debate over whether a president can levy these broad import duties without explicit congressional authorization. Now, Trump has also touted the revenue generated by all of his tariffs, estimated by the Congressional Budget Office at about $300 billion annually over the next decade. But the estimates show that a substantial amount may need to be refunded if the court rules against Donald Trump. Now, after the Supreme Court ruling, refunds of $175 billion will exceed the combined fiscal 2025 outlay from the Department of Transportation at $127.6 billion, and also the Department of Justice at about $44.9 billion. Now, these tariffs imposed by the American president have affected many countries across the boards with different rates. For instance, India, after a tariff deal, has got 18%. Indonesia has 19%. Pakistan has 19%. Bangladesh at 19%. China currently has 37% tariffs. The EU has managed to get a 15% deal. Vietnam has gotten a 20% deal. And Brazil has a tariff of 50%. Now, importers from these nations have paid duties that could now return to them through claims processes. The legal teams are preparing the next steps as the government is assessing compliance. Markets are monitoring the effect on trade flows and federal budgets ahead. But the question now is, of course, this: what are Trump's other options? He can still wield tariff authority through Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Now, the Act targets national security threats, and Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 that is aimed at unfair trade practices. All right, and our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us from New York. She's, of course, tracking all the developments as they are unfolding at this moment. Susan, this is a critical moment in Donald Trump's presidency. One of his pet projects that he was using, these tariffs, to try and get more leverage with nations that he was dealing with, has now been struck down by the American Supreme Court. Tell us what happens from here on.
Right. So basically, the justices ruled that it is Congress that has power of the purse. And at the end of the day, they did not buy President Trump's justification and his administration's justification in using this 1977 Emergency Act. They said at the end of the day, tariffs are taxes, and that goes straight to Congress to decide. Moving forward, we'll have to wait and see how fast Congress wants to decide, or whether or not they will sort of have a mandate and codify tax laws for the Trump administration and these tariffs to move forward, or are they going to stand back and watch the Trump administration use its other tools in its toolbox? I think it's important to note that while the justices did rule on this, and it is a huge setback, it doesn't mean that tariffs are illegal. It means presidential authority has to be limited. On limits of presidential authority was the opinion that was discussed in using these emergency laws for these tariffs. But there's a lot of questions remaining. While there is celebration among small businesses, and the Democrats have been celebrating on Capitol Hill, senators and Congress members have all said that this is a welcome note for the Americans. It's not yet clear how they need to adjust at this point, how much of this money needs to be returned, and most of all, whether or not it's going to be in a limbo for months or years, or is this litigation just going to fall apart and the Trump administration is going to, start a new cycle. So there is a lot of uncertainty, but for now, at least, it seems that the Democrats and businesses are celebrating, and I can tell you China is celebrating right now as well.
Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us and getting us all those updates. We'll, of course, come back to you as this very crucial story continues to unfold in the United States of America. One of Donald Trump's pet projects, to use tariffs to try and push forth his foreign policy. Is there going to be a change with respect to how Trump will operate at the White House from here on. To put things in perspective,